good to go.
Okay, so I'm Monica Rohrbach, and I will be presenting on AVID. AVID is Advancement via Individual Determination in Students, and why it makes a difference. So AVID was started by Mary Catherine Swanson back in 1980, so it's been going now for almost 40 years. AVID is a program initially started just in the high schools to help students that are interested or have hopes to plan to pursue college that are not in your typical data points of students that are able to attend college, to help them in their success getting through high school and to be college ready. And by doing so, they teach students of all backgrounds, helping to work on the achievement gap and thereby getting more students college and career ready to both graduate high school at higher rates than their non-AVID peers, as well as to then be ready for college and college admissions. In the less than 40 years that AVID has been around, they have statistically improved the rates of college attendance, admissions, and graduations at nearly 4 times the rate of the students that are the similar students that are not AVID students, that are not enrolled in a structured AVID program and mentoring progress in their high schools. Within the time frame that AVID has been going, they've not only enlarged the number of students that have been participating in AVID over the years, but they've also been able to expand into not just AVID classrooms, but AVID schools at the high school, AVID districts, expanding into the middle schools. I know the student school and district that I'm in has AVID in all of the middle schools. So that's 4 schools, middle schools within my district, 2 high schools in our district, and AVID is expanding into some programs at the elementary level in different parts of the nation. In addition to academic preparedness, these students also are benefiting from the social and emotional learning components within the AVID's alignment with CASEL's 5 core competencies, with self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, as well as social awareness. All of these school skills that the students are working on has been in alignment with ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act from the federal government. It has been working along with and in connection with the Common Core state standards. So the AVID standards and focus is in line with the Common Core state standards. They support one another, and AVID helps bring along those standards that have been a national priority and bringing them to all of the students. They're aligned with those college and work expectations. They're clear and understandable standards for students and teachers that teach. They encourage all students to participate in classes of rigor. So instead of the students just, making their way through their 4 years of high school, taking their required classes, AVID works with the teachers and students and families to help get those students into AP classes, IB programs when applicable, college career, dual enrollment classes, things like honors level courses, things like that, to help those students when they do get to college to be prepared and ready and capable of success at the college. So they do build upon all of the state standards as well as in the different content areas. They help with that college readiness in the US as well as global readiness. Within that, they also have evidence-based data that shows what they are doing is succeeding. And the statistics back up the program. Okay.
Anybody have any comments on Avid?
I'm not sure. Are any of you teachers at Avid schools?
No.
We use Avid in Garden City, most middle school and high school. So we have separate Avid classes, and then it's all integrated into the other classrooms as well. Every teacher is Avid certified in the middle school and high school.
Oh. All of our yeah, we have Avid at both of our high schools and middle schools, and we have teachers, you know, that are becoming more trained in it, and they're integrating it more into our curriculum and professional development. But we certainly don't have everybody Avid trained and certified yet.
So at my elementary school, I'll move on to the next topic, SIOP, if everyone's cool with that. At my elementary school, we use SIOP methods. SIOP is Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, and it's been around for over 15 years. It was developed to make content material more comprehensible for English language learners. My school is over 60% English language learners, so we definitely utilize a lot of these methods. The theory behind it is that learning rigorous standards-based subject matter is challenging for many students, but it is particularly difficult for students who are not yet English speakers. Although these students learn in many of the same ways as English speakers, they benefit from adjustments made to instruction so that it is more understandable for them. Some of the features of instruction shown to be effective for enhancing learning for English learners include modeling, using multiple media to provide visual aids, providing repetition, additional practice, and using students' background knowledge to make information meaningful, highlighting and teaching key vocabulary, building on students' native language proficiency, and planning opportunities for students to interact with one another on text-based tasks. So that's kind of a little bit of background on SIOP and the reasons for it. Some ways that, like it said, that it had features, and the SIOP model consists of 8 interrelated components: lesson preparation, building background, comprehensible input strategies, interaction, practice, application, lesson delivery, and then review and assessment. Under the SIOP model, our school has more specifically been working on the BDI, which is biography-driven instruction. So when I started last year, I was learning all about BDI because our whole school was kind of switching over to that kind of method under the SIOP umbrella. I've learned that BDI is a part of SIOP because BDI, it uses BDI is a communicative, cognitive method for providing culturally responsive pedagogy that guides teachers to maximize each learner's potential for language acquisition and content learning by drawing upon students' sociocultural, linguistic, cognitive, and academic resources. So basically, it uses students' background knowledge and works with each student kind of individually to build upon that. So some methods or strategies that a lot of teachers at my school use for that is linking language, vocabulary quilt. They do foldables with their paper for kind of like graphic organizers. Dots charts. They do a lot of dots charts, which is determine, observe, talk, and summarize. So it's like a visual kind of grid. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but it's like a grid that you can make on a big paper, with A, B, C, D, the whole alphabet, and do a interactive kind of popcorn out ideas that have to do with, if you're introducing a new topic, you can popcorn out ideas for background knowledge to just words and vocab and terms to help connect background knowledge to this new topic. And then you observe, once everyone's done, you observe all the words and you talk about it as groups or individually and summarize together. So that's just like one method that a lot of teachers at my school use. There are some methods that I think in my art classroom that I can use, and I have started using to use these BDI strategies and PSYOP strategies. Like think, pair, share. I started doing that when I was introducing new topics, new units, because when I'm introducing a new unit, we're not making art necessarily on that first day. So, but instead of just doing the kind of traditional, what do they call it? Sage on the stage kind of lecture model, trying to use strategies that really activate the students more and engage them more. So, and knowing that my students, that's kind of the BDI part of it, knowing that my students don't sit still for very long, and especially with their ELL backgrounds, making sure we are checking for understanding often is really helpful. But one of those strategies I started using was think, pair, share, which like if I introduce a new topic and they think, write down maybe their ideas, they pair up with a partner and share their ideas, and then maybe I extend it to then those partners share with their table group, and then I call out on the table groups to like share with the whole class. We can discuss ideas together. But really trying to get them all engaged is really important, because that's the hard part about having students, I feel like, with diverse backgrounds and that are ELL students, just making sure that they're engaged and activated, because otherwise I might not be reaching them. So that's kind of the background in how I use PSYOP and how my school uses it and what I've observed from that. Does anyone else use PSYOP or BDI methods in their school?
I use the think, pair, share quite often in my middle school classroom. It seems to be, kids learn from each other way more than they'll ever learn from us, I think. So giving them the opportunity to listen to somebody, another student talk is easier for them to understand. So I use that quite often.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes if I'm getting bored of my own voice, I know my students are. So I'm like, okay, it's time for a break. Like, let's get up and move around the classroom and like do some sort of, it's still a structured learning activity. It's not just like playtime. It's not just break time, but it gets them up and moving. And when Socorro from the BDI program from K-State, when she comes and does, what's the word?
Intervention?
Yeah, or in-service.
Okay.
In-service meetings with us. She often incorporates it in her own, like the strategies in her own meetings, because she'll be talking for a while and then she'll have all of us teachers like get up and do one of the strategies. And it actually, like, when you experience it, you're like, yeah, I really did need to stand up and like move around and talk to someone, instead of just like, because you start to, even adults like start to zone out and stop listening at a certain point.
Right.
So it makes sense. Are you the only one, do you think, Dylan? Does anyone else use kind of those strategies?
We use Kagan strategies in our school, which is pretty much the same thing, but just
Yeah.
a different name, I guess.
Yeah, same here. We have a lot of the, we have a lot of, we have a lot of the same strategies in our school and district. And I know I went through a Kagan training, and it goes through a lot of the same strategies for students.
Right. Any more comments on that? All right. So I guess I'm next. I have MTSS, and that's a multi-tiered system of support is what it stands for. And it basically has 4 basic components: a multi-level prevention system, universal screening, progress monitoring, and database decision making. So our school uses this is fully engaged in using MTSS at the K through 6 level. And they do it in the middle school, but it's kind of contradictory because they are fully engaged in AVID too, so it's just a different system. So how it starts out is basically the beginning of the year, how our school does it. Every student is tested through FastBridge in reading, math, and literacy, all those basic tests. And then each school has a math coach, a reading coach, and a literacy coach. And basically they take the data. And then we have weekly PLCs they go over with the teachers. And every student is given an intervention. So every student has an intervention period. And that'd be our level. So the 3 levels, or the 3 tiers, are tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So your tier 1 instruction is basically just whole group instruction. So it's just the instruction they get on a daily basis. Tier 2 would be the first level of intervention. So it'd be small groups. And this is done typically by a non-homeroom teacher or an interventionist or a para, or sometimes me as a PE teacher, I had to teach an intervention. And then there's tier 3, which is one-on-one. Typically, to get to tier 3, a student has to go and has to be recommended to a SAT committee, which is made up in the school. And then basically this student, all the teachers gather information. It's kind of like a formal IEP, but it's before then. It's basically trying to reach the students' issues before they get recommended for an IEP. So they're in front of the SAT team. All the teachers kind of voice their concerns, talk about what they're good at, what their strengths and weaknesses outside of the data, because we already have the data from FastBridge. And then they come up with an intervention plan. So in every subject, they have an intervention plan after they reach the SAT team. So that's when paras come in, or interventionists. We have paras that are called interventionists. So they'll be in the classroom. They're not special ed paras. So they'll help certain students that are basically went to the SAT team. And then they use the FastBridge progress monitoring to see how well the interventions are working. Like I said, we have every building has the coaches assigned to them, so they help the teachers with the data in the PLCs. And then me as a PE teacher, I don't deal with it that much. I was at 5th and 6th grade my first 2 years, and I had to teach an intervention. So it was a reading intervention, which was kind of weird because I'm not trained in reading, but they don't really give you any information. They just say, hey, you're doing a reading intervention. You need to cover this. So it was kind of weird, but we got through it. And then the students that are above will use that time as to do other like project-based learning and stuff like that. That's above and beyond their classroom. So it works a little bit different once they get into middle school, like I said, because it's AVID based in middle school and high school. But once they get into middle school, they still have the MTSS. They still have the universal screening. but they'll take away one of their electives for their intervention time. So not every student has an intervention anymore, but if they need an intervention, it'll be during an elective time. All the middle schoolers have 3 electives, so they could have up to 3 interventions if needed. It's all based on data and progress monitoring. So instead of waiting for a student to fall behind, it's kind of a proactive approach to it. So you get the testing data right at the beginning of the school year, and then you put in interventions in place so a student doesn't fall behind. In theory, it works really well, but there are some downfalls to it because, like I said, they might be you might group 10 kids in a math intervention that are in different levels or different lessons of math. So they're just getting more math, and it's not necessarily what they're struggling with. So that's a downfall, but it's just people. You don't have enough people in any school system, I bet, to make it work fully. But then the literacy coaches and everything, they kind of help out with that, and they'll be in the interventions. I mean, the data's kind of proven. I know the KSDE pushes MTSS quite a bit, just because it's pretty data driven to keep students from falling behind in school. I mean, like I said, I'm a PE teacher, so I don't have a whole lot of history with it, but I do know that it helps keep students off IEPs, and it keeps them in the general ed classroom. But I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about it, unless everybody else has anything.
Yeah, we use MTSS pretty heavily. I teach in the middle school, so I have grades 6 through 8 is our middle school. And we have a progress monitoring system too called AIMSweb that each kid gets. They take a test, and we do it quarterly. So they're tested, and then everybody gets put into what's called an MTSS class. So 4 days a week we meet, and everybody gets put into an MTSS class. And they're either in a tier 1 MTSS, a tier 2, or a tier 3, which, you outlined what each of those is defined as. So if a kid, is testing at or above where they're supposed to be, they'll get put into a tier 1 where they have minimal interventions, and then most of the time they get to use the rest of that time for study hall. And then down to tier 3 where the majority of their time is for interventions, and those class sizes are smaller, and they're one-on-one with those teachers as well.
Yeah, we used to use AIMSweb. We just switched to FastBridge last year, and all of the teachers have to be. I mean, like me as a PE teacher, I had to give tests like reading tests and stuff. And we also have there's a social emotional aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
So some of those students may be fine cognitively, but they might have some social emotional problems. So there's social emotional interventions, and we use SABRS, I think is what it's called, to test that or monitor that.
Yeah.
What MTSS groups are you guys in charge of?
Well, the first year I was in charge of an intervention, and then I was in charge of an enrichment project. So it was like the tier 1.
Tier 1, yeah.
Yeah. The first year it was tier 2. Then they quickly figured out that classroom teachers those subject teachers should probably be giving those interventions instead of the specials teachers. But yeah, so the tier 1s were, we did projects. We did social services, we did like food drives, and they had to plan it. It was supposed to be like quad D learning, I guess, is what we were working on.
Our school, at our school, we have, it used to be, last year it was called, or last several years it's been called guided studies. Now we call them flex classes. I'm at a middle school 6 to 8, and I teach 7th. And we have team mean also. So we pretty much map test our kids a couple times a year. And then the kids that are needing the interventions and that are scoring low in the reading and math get interventions during their flex time but that's only our class is every other day, and then they have PE on the alternating days. So our kids that are testing low or are not meeting the standards, they still only get those interventions every other day. And depending upon the group size, they're not necessarily smaller. But I can only imagine, and I know my district, that taking away electives for that would not go over well. They won't take electives away pretty much for anything. So, but I don't know. I could see, I definitely see, I wish we had opportunities for kids to have to do the extra work to then, learn something, because we have a number of kids every year that will tell us, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I fail because I know that you're not going to actually retain me.
Yeah.
So,
That's one of the big downfalls that comes with it is the students never get retained, I think. So, yeah.
well, I mean, at least your kids are losing electives. Our kids aren't, they don't lose electives for anything.
Yeah.
So I noticed that there's only 5 minutes and 45 seconds left of the meeting time. Is there a way we can extend that so we don't get chopped off?
I think it just keeps going over.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, so I'll go ahead and start talking then on PBIS, which stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. And basically what the definition of that is kind of rewarding positive behavior rather than scolding negative behavior. And I know that's kind of been a big push in our building at the middle school, because we've got so many kids that come in and have a rough life at home, I guess you could say, and maybe that's all they get. All the attention they get is negative attention. So when they come to school, that's the only way they know how to get attention, is through negative behavior. And so something that we've tried to do recently is really start rewarding positive behavior and kind of training students how to self-regulate themselves and train students what behavior is expected, rather than scolding them for behavior that is not expected, if that makes sense. And this, I saw a quote that says, if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, and then it says ? Punish. So I thought that was a really good quote, that sometimes kids just don't know how to behave, and don't know what is expected of them in a positive environment. So PBIS is an easy way to, or a scaffolded way to kind of teach kids the proper way to behave in proper settings. So PBIS was a part of the amendment in 1997 to the Disabilities Education Act, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Basically, its big push is to improve school climate. Changing school climate tends to push an increase in attendance rates, academic achievement, and graduation rates. Obviously, if kids feel comfortable at school and the climate at school is fun to be around and kids want to be there, obviously they're going to have a better attitude and tend to behave like they're supposed to, rather than if they feel like the atmosphere at school is not fun. A scenario that I saw whenever I was doing some research, the difference between traditional behavior, handling behavior the traditional way, and then handling behavior using PBIS. The scenario says, during a class discussion, a student sitting in the back throws a spitball. With a traditional approach, the teacher might scold and send the student to the principal's office. After the student is punished, the student returns to class and is expected to behave, but there's no instruction on how to act appropriately. If that same situation was used, or if that situation was handled using PBIS, the teacher may notice before the incident happens that student is trying to create a sense of they want attention. Then a student or a teacher may call on that student to answer a question just to get them involved in the conversation, that would kind of derail them from being able to make that negative behavior. PBIS is also tiered in 3 tiers, kind of like MTSS, where tier 1 consists usually of about 80% of your students, which are universal or primary prevention. Okay, so that's just preventing the negative behavior. Tier 2 is going to include about 15% of your students, and that's where you have group supports, smaller groups, where you're teaching these ways to behave and acceptable behaviors to do inside the classroom. And then Tier 3 is called the tertiary prevention, where you've got the individualized support for those students. So we use each week we give each class or each grade level gets what's called Ram Time. Our mascot's the Rams, so we call it Ram Time. And basically we reward kids for doing the things that they're supposed to do throughout the week. So we use a strike system for our behavior management, I guess you could say. So if students don't turn in any late work, if they don't get striked, if they act the way that they're supposed to act, then they're eligible for Ram Time, which is a 25-minute period at the end of the day, one time a week, where they just get to go to the gym and hang out, or they can go to a classroom and play on their computer, or if they're not eligible, they have to go to another room, and it's kind of a busy work type thing. So it's rewarding the kids that do the things that they're supposed to, but I'm not so sure that we're not doing anything during that specific time period to influence those kids who don't reach that incentive. We do a social emotional thing where we teach kids, how to self-regulate themselves, and when I get angry, what am I supposed to do to keep myself from making bad choices and all of those kinds of things. But I'm just not sure that we've made that next step of really preventing, but we're definitely working in that direction, I guess you could say. Does anybody else use any forms of PBIS in their school district?
We just started